On December 19th, 1777, a beaten, tired, and ill-supplied Continental Army arrived in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. In February of 1778, General Washington was put into contact with a man that would help steer the war in America's favor. That man's name was Frederick Wilhelm Ludolf Gerhard Augustin von Steuben, or Baron von Steuben for short. He was an experienced officer in the Prussian military, and upon Washington's request, wrote a much-needed book for the American Army. It was a standardized training manual that laid out exactly how soldiers were to be trained from that point forward. It was called the Regulations for the Order and Discipline of the Troops of the United States, or as it became affectionately known, the Blue Book. Now, prior to Baron von Steuben's arrival at Valley Forge, there was no standard way of training American soldiers. Some were using one manual, some were using another, but his book lays it all out, exactly what these troops were supposed to do. For today, we're going to go ahead and jump forward a little bit. We're going to start with Chapter 5 of that book, called Of the Instruction of the Recruits. Now, as opposed to the modern military, where there's a standard 10 to 13-week training program for these new recruits, instead, in the Continental Army, Baron von Steuben says the commanding officer of each company is charged with the instruction of his recruits. And he does go on to say that that is a service that requires not only experience, but a patience and temper not met with in every officer. So he does understand not everybody's going to be suited for this job, but he is to make choice of an officer, sergeant, and maybe one or two corporals of his company who, being approved of by the colonel of the entire regiment, are to attend particularly to that business. And sometimes, in the case of a great number of recruits showing up to a camp, well, every officer without distinction is to be employed on that service. Now, after arriving to be trained, the recruits must then be taken singly and taught to put on their accoutrements and carry themselves properly. Next, the recruit will be taught the position of a soldier without arms, seen here. At the word of attention, a soldier must stand silent, firm and steady, moving neither hand nor foot except as ordered, but attend carefully to the words of command. Attention! The manual also states that in this position, the soldier's heels must be 2 inches apart and the toes turned out. At the command to the right face, the soldier is to turn briskly to the right, lifting up on the toes a little and describing the quarter of a circle. Every time a soldier faces, he is to bring the right foot back into its proper position without stamping. After learning the rest of his facings, the soldier will learn how to march. The common step for a soldier of the Continental Army is 2 feet and about 75 in a minute. The soldier will step off with his left foot and march in a free, easy, and natural step. Now, these soldiers were not just trained to march in the common step forward. They were also trained to march in the oblique step, which is a very fancy way of saying, instead of marching forward, these soldiers are marching diagonally down that field. They could do this either right or left. When charging with a bayonet, soldiers would not be marching by the common step. They would get the command to march, on which the whole advanced by the quick step. This was Baron von Steuben's way of telling the men to march faster. Once being taught to march, a soldier would then be taught the position of a soldier under arms. Now, in this position, it involved the soldier's musket. It was to be carried on the left shoulder at such a height that the guard is just under the left breast. It should also be felt along the left side, the stock pressed against the hip. Firing a soldier's musket took 12 steps. The first step was to half-cock firelock. The soldier was to make an L shape out of his feet and then open up the pan of the musket. The soldier would then handle a cartridge of powder and shot out with his thumb and forefinger, bring it to his mouth, and tear it open. Hold it at his chin until he hears the command to prime. And after that, shut pan. Once the pan is shut, powder secured, he'd cast the piece about in front of him and charge with cartridge. He would make sure to ram that cartridge down to secure it on the other side of the barrel. Now, after ramming this cartridge down, he would be ensured to return rammer to make sure he doesn't fire it downrange. He'd bring the musket back into his shoulder, Cock fire lock, or make ready, take aim,
Fire.
and that's just the basics. Soldiers would then train to do this on both the company and battalion level. With Baron von Steuben's help and his Blue Book, the American Army was transformed into a professional one. Now, if you or someone you know would like to have this book, we do have it in our gift shop at the American Revolution Museum in Yorktown, just as a side note. But until then, guys, thanks for stopping by the channel. See you next time.